And as I said, I think it's disingenuous if you talk about quality in one context and then you don't reflect it in another. Actually, if you have Bertoya furniture around, not only does it reflect who you are, how you think, and what your standards are and so forth, but I think that it also causes you to act and to operate and to design in a certain way. Would you believe, a 4-star restaurant chef who dines exclusively in his home on Big Macs or sliders or whatever? Yeah. Within this context, it's reasonable also to understand. There's a little bit of a side, I guess, but there's kind of a debate about form versus function. Is it always a matter of having something that's aesthetically very satisfying, but what does that do to the function? Or is it a matter of making something as functional as possible, but you give up a little bit on the formal aesthetic qualities? How do you balance those two? Well, you don't balance those two, you bring them together. It's not an either-or situation. Bring them together. Form is a function. Form is a function of all design. And we shouldn't, we don't elevate it above the obvious other functional things, the fact that this is a chair that you can sit in relatively comfortably and so forth. Of course, it serves that function. But if you have that chair in your living room, you probably have half a dozen chairs or whatever. You're sitting in another chair most of the time. For all practical purposes, 90% of the time, its function is sculpture. And so the sculptural function, the quality of life. We're human beings. We need beauty and music and theater and all that. Those are the things that those are the things that I'm looking more forward to than sweeping the sidewalk in retirement. Kathy, you'll sweep the sidewalk. Form is a function. You think about architecture. We go past all kinds of buildings on the street, and we don't notice them, but we do. I mean, if you go down the street and somebody farts alongside of you, you notice that. That sense category is more controlled. We're more selective. We don't impose stink on ourselves. If the car screeches alongside you, you hear that. But there are all kinds of visual farts in the environment. Visual swill, and we don't notice it because we're so inundated with it. And that's why we have such a big job to do. We walk past buildings all the time that are, of course they have to function for whatever the purpose is inside. For people, they have to be comfortable, they have to work well, lighting, all of that. Those are obvious functions that the architect has to deal with. But most of the buildings are not used by most of the people, but they're encountered by most of the people. I walk by hundreds of buildings, or drive by thousands of buildings all the time that I'm never going to have need to go into and do anything in. But they're part of my environment. They're monumental sculptures. And that's a function. We have to think about the innocent bystanders. Obstacles. I once heard an interview with the actor Michael Caine on radio, and he was talking about an early acting class that he was in. And he walked into the scene, and there was a chair in the way, and he kind of threw him off, and he forgot his lines, and so it really messed up the play. And so later on, the acting coach, after the play was over, the acting coach pulled him aside and said, "Look, what you do as a creative artist, as a creative actor, is to use the obstacle. If it's a comedy and you find accidentally, surprisingly, that there's a chair in the way, then you kind of do something stupid and turn it into a comedy routine. Or if it's a drama, you grab the chair and sling it across the stage. Robert wouldn't let me do that. Break it, you buy it, right? That's what we do as designers. There are no obstacles, there are no limitations, no difficulties. That's the fodder. That's what the design problem-solving process is all about. The creative design problem-solving process. To embrace the obstacles, to use the limitations, to turn them into the advantages. Because then, once you can identify the obstacles, the peculiarities, the difficulties in a particular circumstance, and you embrace those, that forms the solution, which is then peculiar to that particular circumstance. So that tailors the result. And you can apply this creative design problem-solving process to any number of contexts. That's why I'm happy that there are people here who are not working on a board all the time. I'm happy that there are people working on design who are not a board on a computer. But you can apply it to other contexts. And just a personal example of that, when I was early on in my headship of the program, we had a kind of confluence of difficulties, of issues that we were facing at the same time. And there were kind of little annoyances and difficult to deal with individually, but for instance, this Noel Martin, who taught one peculiar class one day a week, decided he couldn't teach for us anymore. And it was a unique course, so it wasn't possible to just pick up somebody to come in and fill that slot. It was an unusual experience. The visiting lecture budget that I had gotten at the offset was cut because there were budget exigencies. There have been budget exigencies every year since in the university system. So they cut off. So the university cut out the little stuff that seemed to be frill and unnecessary. So they cut off the visiting lecture fund. And when we did have visiting lecturers, the students would take it kind of lightly. If it wasn't at dinner time, they might come. If it was at dinner time, or they had a pressing project to work on, they might not come, no matter how prominent the person was. And in fact, the visitor didn't take it as seriously as I felt that they should either. I thought that while they were here, this was what more important than dealing with design students. But their mind was on that multi-$1,000, million-dollar job back home that was waiting for them. So they skipped in and out. We also wanted to extend our reputation in whatever ways we could. We also wanted to do things that would engage the Cincinnati design community, would bring them in. So there were a number of little issues like that. And what I did was to kind of combine them and compress that vacated course into 1 week each quarter for the juniors. And during that week, we eliminated all the coursework for the other classes during that time, and essentially hired the most preeminent superstar graphic designer that we could find in the world to come and teach that course. So essentially, they were on the faculty during that period of time. They came, gave an assignment at the beginning of the week, met daily for hours, several hours each day with the students, and critiqued and graded the students at the end of the week. It gave the faculty a chance to hang out with these people, and that was enriching for us. The students were committed naturally in a way that they hadn't been otherwise. The visitor was kind of honored, I guess, to be on the faculty essentially and giving a project and really saw the seriousness of this. The university didn't see it as being very vulnerable because it was a line budget item. The students were getting credit for the course, so it wasn't eliminated as easily. The visitor gave a public lecture, and so we could invite the Cincinnati design community in, and they were some of the most public.